You're listening to Chem Stories, a podcast series created by people with lived experience of P&P chemsex.
Hey, my sparkles. This is Captain Patrice speaking from the flight deck of Chem Stories Airlines. We're now in the third part of our YUL creativity flight. Montreal host Éric resumes his conversation with Gabriel and Mikiki, who explore the tension between suffering and pleasure in the context of chemsex and the role of art in processing these experiences. Should you experience turbulence while listening to this podcast, please visit our list of resources and services related to P&P chemsex in the episode description and on chemstories.ca. Thank you for choosing Chem Stories Airlines, where the journey is always a trip.
I was interested in asking both of you, but thinking about that relationship to history and context and the idea of suffering and like, are drugs a part of our context for what we know of the world? And what does that mean for our relationship to deciding to take drugs or not deciding to take drugs? And how do we see the relationship of drugs in relation to our individual relationship to suffering?
It's a big question, right? Well, I wanted also to talk about this topic, and you touched it also in your video that we talked about sooner, Mikiki. But we often talk about the suffering part, but we don't talk about yet the community and the fun that's happening in chemsex context. And for me, my relationship with drug, many things are coming in my mind at the same time. But because I talked a few days ago with a friend who was talking to me about one of his friends who started doing crystal meth, and this person was telling me that he was worried about his friend and everything. And of course, what I could see from this person that was outside the drug use, he was worried for his friend. And he was, of course, which is like normal from someone from outside. But it was really interesting because he was talking to me because he knew I knew about what his friend was going through. And what I told him, what went out of my mind and my mouth was, don't forget that your friend right now is having a lot of fun. and it's great. He's talking to you. He's telling you what's happening and he's telling you what he's going through. And that's amazing. But the only thing you might not know, you know about drugs, you know about crystal meth, you're informed, so you know the risk, you know the blah, 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 you know the context about it, but you've never done chemsex and your friend is telling you he's doing chemsex. And so what he's experiencing right now, especially at the beginning, is he's having a lot of fun and he's experiencing a lot of things in his sexual life, new things, discovering probably really new stuff, probably feeling emotions he never felt before about themselves, of feeling seen, feeling sexy, feeling great in his sexual life. And it was for me, of course, I was talking about me when I was starting to do chemsex. And I think that if I would have heard this kind of way of talking about addiction before, I started using in 2011. So it was pretty early. In Montreal, crystal meth was not, it was a few years in, but it was not a long time before. So 2011, nobody was talking about chemsex and there was no discussion about it. There was no groups talking about it. There was no way of understanding it on another way than it's terrifying and you're gonna die and you're destroying yourself. But that was not at all what I was feeling at the beginning. And in the drug use, this is not what you want to feel. Also, this is not at all. And in your video, there's someone who talks about the fact that you don't choose to become an addict. You don't decide to become an addict. It's not like something you plan or you want to do. But yeah, what you want for what I wanted for me was not the suffering. Sometimes I think it's very simple to say that suffering leads to substance use. It can be. It's a part of the equation. Sometimes it can be. But I had really a desire to live more by using substances. I had a desire to access a sexuality I thought I couldn't access in other forms. So yeah, so all that to say that I think that suffering for me was a consequence of my using, but I think it's important to talk about the fun because I think if people had explained me or if I had knew that what I was actually experiencing, this pleasure and this fun, I didn't have to be ashamed about it. I think it would have been different. So yeah.
So suffering. Prior to my own using, I've suffered a lot from other people's using. Growing up in a dysfunctional home with an addict dad that got into rehab when I was 14. Lots of things clicked for me at that age because I kind of understand where my suffering came from without knowing that it was stemming from there. I started listening to music at 14. I started like questioning my own sexuality at 14. I started like wanting to lose weight. Like I started wanting to like look better. Like, I don't know, there's something that happened at that age when my dad got into rehab. I started crying a lot, listening to music, thinking about my dad being sad, feeling betrayed. Yeah, and at that same time, I had a sister that got into using a lot, and she would come home high. The police would like bring her back because she had like got into a fist fight with people. I don't know. It was kind of like I had a dad that was like doing his 12-step. I was going to meetings with him. He was getting his cakes. Everything was going better. Like he was kind of mending this relationship, but also I had like a lot of resentment. And I had this sister that was kind of like leaving, you know, and I was 14, she was 12. And it's kind of that age where you stop bickering and you start like having more of a relationship with your sibling. And I kind of like was robbed of that because of addiction. So for me, suffering started before using.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when I moved to Montreal from Quebec City, I didn't have it in my face as much, you know. Also, I was left with myself, my own suffering, my own expectation of myself, wanting to be perfect, wanting to like, because I was always like the perfect child, like great grades, you know, like, and my sister was kind of the rebel. So when I was in Montreal trying to be perfect again, didn't work because like couldn't do my chores. Like it was hard to go to the groceries. Like all these adulting things were like so hard. And I was like working, going to school. My life was like about performing, you know, performing this expectation that I like, or performing and like trying to attain the expectation that was so linked also to like my worth. And when I discovered crystal meth, it's like I could breathe again.
Yeah.
It's like I could like have a relief from all these expectations. And it's like there was no more suffering. So it was kind of like what made me suffer kind of like was the antidote to my own suffering.
Yeah.
But then while I was doing it, like in my honeymoon like period with like meth,
honeymoon.
yeah, was very, very short-lived. And I remember the first time I did it, it was a morning. Like I went to some guy's place and it was like in December, like there was like a snowstorm or whatever. And I went to see my best friend at my place after, and I just told her everything that happened.
Yeah.
How I was like, this happened and like, I felt so good but then this guy became like paranoid and he kicked me out of this place. And then it was like, oh my God. But I was saying like, oh my God, I'm never going to do this again. But like, it was fun, you know? Yeah. And then a few months on, that same friend called her at like 2 a.m. in the morning, said, I'm still doing this. I got kicked out of a guy's place. Can I come sleep at yours? Walked from like Old Montreal all the way to Hochelaga and went to sleep at hers, you know? So that kind of like change of like, oh, it's so exciting. Like I this new thing and like, it's so fun. Like, but I'm never going to do it again. And then quickly switch and like, I'm doing it behind closed doors, not telling anyone. And then first bad experience, I still have her on my phone and like goes to sleep at her place and kind of like unloads all of like that's been happening, you know? Yeah. So that over like, maybe it was like December and like maybe March, like it started to get ugly. And kind of like my first wake up call was when at work, they told me I had an attitude problem. And I got like some warnings.
I don't have an attitude problem. I got a meth problem.
No, but yeah, they were telling me like, yeah, you're this close to getting fired, blah, blah, if you don't fix that, blah, blah. And then to me it clicked. And I was like, I thought it was the job, the problem. I thought it was people surrounding me. Like people were not giving me like what I should be having, like the responsibilities I should be having. And it was other people's fault. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm the person that has a problem. I'm an addict. My problem is crystal meth, you know? Yeah. And from that moment, every time I would use again, felt shame. I shouldn't be doing this. And then I would spin into like panic attacks.
Yeah.
And then at that time, I kind of like, I would call my mom and call my dad immediately. I'm the kind of person that's like, I have to tell anyone after it's happening because it's like, it helps me like process. So in like a full circle moment, like I could call my dad being like, yeah, I just used blah, blah, blah. I just relapsed, and he would like listen to me and everything. But that didn't stop me from continuing, or because I think at that time I was trying to go the furthest I can, the quickest. Like I switched from smoking to injection in the first like 3 months. Like I wasn't scared. I just wanted to like feel something, I guess.
Yeah.
That was like the first time, or that would keep me away from my responsibilities, from my own suffering. But then it would cause more and more and more and more suffering. It would pile on. And yeah, until I went into like my first semester, my second to last semester in university, and I decided to like fully stop after like months of like negotiating of like, oh, I could still like drink alcohol or still smoke weed or nah. But every time I would end up doing meth.
Yeah. Totally.
And when I decided to stop everything, so I started to go see a social worker, and I tried to also get PrEP. I got into a study to get PrEP, and then relapsed, and then did a test again, got tested positive for HIV. And that moment was kind of like the lowest of the lows, because that was the closest to death that I could attain, you know? And for me, the next time I would use was death itself. So from that moment on, from that day where I got like diagnosed with HIV, I stopped using everything for sure. Like for like 3 years and a half, I didn't do anything. I was white knuckling it, as they call it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, which means like you just stopped with nothing, no help, no groups,
no
therapist.
I had like a social worker, but
but
I
still.
stopped seeing her like after like 3-4 months because I felt better, you know. And yeah, so in that time of like after my diagnosis, that's when I really like dived into like creation and like doing like the collection Sorry Mom and being recognized for my work and almost like a role model also. And I kind of attached myself to that role model idea where I could be an example for others.
Yeah.
And when I released Sorry Mom and Honeycomb at the Festival Mode Design Fashion Show, it was such a high. After that, I kind of had planned nothing after it, that I went into like this kind of depression.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean,
The dopamine trough of after any success is so real. And especially as creators, no one tells us about that.
That's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of like was like, okay, what's next for me? What should I do? And then I wanted to do a new collection.
Okay.
And then
But were you able to ride out that low period?
That low, yeah.
Without using?
Without using, because I was so stubborn.
Girl, that's incredible.
I was so stubborn.
Incredible.
I was so stubborn, and I had a lot of pride because I was now being seen by like these 3,000 followers on Instagram. 100,000 people saw my Vice interview.
Okay.
Like I was being recognized on the street because of my Vice interview that's been like seen so many times on Facebook. At that time, Facebook was used.
But it's also about you.
How do you call it?
That was also about positioning you as someone who was in recovery as well.
Yes.
So there must have been.
It was my branding.
It's a brand, and this is really important. It's huge, and then it gives you time to, I think, process why you're doing it really, and what's the reasons, and do you really want to do that? Because some people go back to using some things, or try to use less, or
use recovery as a way of replacing the patterns and connections.
Exactly,
which is why I'm so fascinated to have this conversation with people that have creative pursuits that can soak up so much. Or we can be soaked so much in that, not as a replacement, but as an alternative. I find it so fascinating because I've also done, so like I've gone to Crystal Meth Anonymous. I've done a, you know, like I'm have to go back to Toronto for my fucking group therapy on Friday. Like I'm still like I'm connected to different interventions around either harm reduction or abstaining. Like I talk about how I'm abstaining from methamphetamine, but I'm using harm reduction with other substances because of that history I have too of like, if I am drinking and then I do a stimulant, then I know it's going straight back to slamming. And I don't have the time and I don't have the interest at this point to do that. So it's,
what can I ask you, when did you lose interest?
When did I
lost interest? You said I don't have interest in slamming. What happened? What was the?
It's an interesting phrase. I'm not sure that I lost interest, but I'll amend, create a friendly amendment to that. It's not that I've lost interest, but there are other things in my life that are more interesting. There are other things that I want to prioritize, and I know that having that emotional availability and a history of feeling more comfortable and confident in my head and therefore in my heart to be able to like be in a room with people where I'm not having to second guess everything, or I'm able to be more emotionally vulnerable and therefore available to conversations, is a thing that requires time away from using that drug in particular. So it's about reminding myself that those are interests of mine, and to be available in the ways that I want to be available for them requires a certain duration that I just don't have the capacity for in the finite amount of time that we have in the, you know, like if I could stop time, I would be very interested in using.
Of course. I mean, if I think for years for me, I was sure I was going to someday manage the time with using in crystal meth. Like I will be able to stop when I need to stop, but it never happened. Like never once in like 9 years. And it's also, I don't know for you, but for me, because Gab, you shared about your suffering, and I would say like, I think we all know the kind of suffering that goes through the drug using. Sometimes that can go to, after, of course, when you're up for 4 days, and then of course things happen, and then you have suffering. You're suffering and you feel like shit and all that. But for me, it was also this kind of back and forth. And this, I think what I love the most about sober life is this kind of anxiety that is not there anymore about, am I going to be able to be present for this, or am I going to show up? Am I going to, like, most of the time now that I'm sober, that I don't use, I can be fully present, and I don't have to kind of plan that much and be so anxious about things that are happening. For me, it was really about controlling my anxiety was the most important thing for me in quitting drugs and crystal meth, was that I was really coming in a place of anxiety that was really, really problematic. And I want, maybe I would like to connect maybe with you, and especially Gab, because you kind of lead us on this path, but how do we, like, we all stated that we kind of used our lives and our using in our art. Gab, you said a lot that you used your suffering, or maybe our parts of your life that were difficult to make your art. I did the same too. I think Mikiki, you did the same too. We haven't touched on that, but we're going to talk about also the mourning that you talk about in your work. And sometimes I feel, and we know that we get a lot from it. Like we get, it helps us to kind of process things, and we can also address trauma, and it can be a kind of a therapy for us. And I don't see that as negative. Some people sometimes see that as negative, but I think it can be all right. But also I talked and I had discussions with other artists who sometimes once they've done that, they feel like people are kind of waiting for that. And people are looking for this in your art. And I will give an example, but I did an interview at the public radio a few weeks ago. And so I had a lot of things going on at the moment. I had my play, so the play I talked about, Ces regards amoureux de garçons altérés, was just produced at Prospero. It was finished, But at the same time, I won the prize for another play, and I got a new job as a director of festival. And so the public television said, okay, we're going to welcome you. And so they call me and they call me in and say, we're going to make an interview about your new position and about the prize you just won and about the play that was at Prospero. And I said, okay, fine. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. And then I get there and they present me and they say, so we're going to talk with Éric Noël about chemsex. And they did almost all the interview about chemsex, just stating the other things.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so, yeah, what's chemsex? What is it? What is crystal meth? And then really kind of going deep in that. And I did a lot of interviews about that in the past, but I knew I was going to do that. And especially at this interview, it was funny because the person before me was a new director of a theater who did a 15 minutes on his new direction of the theater. And he talked about that. And then me, I was asked to talk not about the new direction of the festival, but about my chemsex story. So at some point, I mean, and it's not because I don't want to talk about it. I mean, I have no problem doing interviews about chemsex, and I'm doing this podcast at the moment. It's important for me to talk about it, and I'm willing to, but I just want to know. And I don't want people to use that. And I felt really it was a way to go to the crunchy part and the dark part of like, oh, tell us about. And it was really about like going to talk about these kind of dark things. And it was public radio. So it was kind of... So
Tell us about when you sucked your dick for a syringe.
I felt kind of trapped, you know? I felt...
Yeah.
And also, and it's funny because I didn't know how to... I felt really weird after the interview. And I didn't have the... I don't know. I couldn't react on the moment. Like on the moment, I kind of put my switch to, okay, I'm doing an interview about chemsex, and just like the community member, Éric, just went in, but the artist was a bit far away, and I thought the artist was the person we're going to talk to. Anyway, so do you feel sometime that you kind of have to put this forward? And do you want to, like, would you like at a moment to do art with something else? Or do you think it's just part of it? What's the...
It's a very interesting question because it's also something I ask myself. I do think for me it was important to kind of like deliver myself to a certain extent, and like kind of like addiction, recovery, HIV, all these things for me were important to share because they were true to my own story, and they were also giving me a way to kind of like make sense of my hardships, to be able to kind of like help others and, like, as I said before, break the isolation and et cetera. But I haven't been working on anything new since my last collection, Dear Vicky. I have been questioning myself on what's the next move for me as a fashion designer. And I feel like for now I've told my story, and I've like kind of like shared enough of like who's Gabriel and what I've been through. And I kind of want to, each collection, each project, I want to give myself like a challenge, you know? Like, for instance, for Dear Vicky, I didn't want to use any black because I always kind of had this crutch with like the black. So I just wanted it to challenge myself and only use colors, because I never like identified myself as someone who was like a master of like color. Or I also, for Dear Vicky, wanted to use more stretch fabrics because for Sorry Mom, there was no stretch fabrics. So I kind of taught myself on how to like drape, stretch, and kind of like, so I did underwears, I did bodysuits, I did all these things. So for my next collection, my challenge that I'm giving myself is to...
Do we have a scoop?
Yes. It would be to like speak on a positive subject. Like, I want to share a message of hope. I want to speak on things that makes me happy. And yes, it might tackle subjects that are a bit dark, but in the end, I wanted to kind of be like, to feel like sunshine, you know? And I feel like that was also Sorry Mom and Honeycomb, how they were related to each other. It's like Sorry Mom is like the dark parts, and Honeycomb is like the sun at the end.
And now you had Dear
Vicky, which is like very like mourning my life before HIV and kind of like grieving and really feeling my feelings, and very like water and earth. It's like very feminine energy. Whereas the follow-up to Dear Vicky is much more like fire and air, much more masculine energy into action. Maybe speak about other people, speak about other like give the mic to other people. Kind of like I've said what I needed to say. Now let me be a tunnel of communication for others who are voiceless. So that's kind of like where I'm heading.
Do you find it more difficult to kind of approach this?
I haven't
lighter, or maybe I don't know, like sunnier side of yourself.
Like, yes, it is difficult because, of course, right now I'm not in a point where I'm working on it actively. Because when I did the VICKY, it was like twice as big, and I kind of like cut it in half.
Yeah.
So the first part is what I released, and there's the second part that's been waiting. That I know what I'm doing. I know what's the story. I know like what are the influences and everything. But the kind of end of that collection is supposed to kind of like end on like simple beauty in a way, like which I kind of always despised, like designers that like, oh, I'm inspired by this like flowered pattern like that I found in like Italy, blah, blah, blah. And I just did a whole bunch of dresses with this beautiful flower pattern. And I'm there drawing flowers, you know? And also, I don't know, there's something also like Sorry Mom. And there's the passing of my mom that happened a year and a half ago, which is like when she passed, there was this photo shoot I did with a friend with her, and I just wrote "Farewell, Mom." And I'm not sure about the name of the collection yet, but there's this thing about like wanting to honor like life, but also honor like death in a way too. Yeah. But in a beautiful kind of like, I don't want to give away too much, but like. Yeah, I want to honor like people that are living today, but also like honor people that have lived before and that have like given us the life that we have today.
Yeah, Mikiki, maybe you can. Ooh. I think there's a segue for you there. I think you can. Because I know what I've seen from your work and also connecting that to using our suffering for our work.
Yeah, totally. Maybe I mean, I remember my sister saying that my mother had money set aside, a little bit of money set aside for each of us when she died, and that my sister said that mom wanted her to like hold on to it because she was nervous I was going to spend it on drugs, you know? And like the relationships that we have with our family about how they are able to understand our suffering, well, and also how they're able to understand or not understand our queerness, you know, and how that gets seen and specifically not seen. And like, I remember my brother was so upset when he found out about when I told him about my HIV status. It was multiple years after I'd been diagnosed, and he was so upset that he wasn't able to be there to be a supportive person for me. And I said, I needed to spend these like 4 years educating you so that I didn't have to support you when I was supposed to be getting support from you. Do you remember what your understanding of living with HIV was 4 years ago? And I was like, and look at what it is today. Like, I spent that time educating you so that you could be the support person that you are. And he was still frustrated, but he understood, and we were able to have that conversation. And I feel like there's a piece around chemsex that also is, I'm reminded of when we talk about like, if people are in the early parts, the later parts don't have to be problematic and chaotic use patterns. The later parts could be that people just are not as traumatized as we are and maybe have a different relationship to substance use in general. You know, when I think about like when I stopped using alcohol, when I stopped using methamphetamine, like I just assumed that I would get better at doing life, and I didn't. I just am fucked up and traumatized, and I fuck things up. Yep. And it's hard to have to reckon with that as like, oh, this is sober me still showing up late for shit and still forgetting important things and still disappointing people and still crying for the same reasons, you know? But like now the crying I like a lot more.
Yes.
Like it's I mean, my friend jokingly called me the trauma llama. Which I don't know if you meant like the animal or the guru. Yeah. But I was like, I think the animal.
I saw right away the animal,
but like I am also I am a person that like someone on the subway will come up to and talk about how their best friend just killed himself. You know, like I am a magnet for stories of suffering. And I think that is also a gift that my dead mom gave to me, which is to be open and to be curious. And I think that curiosity is inherently, if we are connected to a kind of earnest and honest curiosity about people's lives, we don't have an opportunity to pass judgment because we're actually too busy being curious. And that's something that I try as a practice to actively cultivate is to try to stay in my curiosity about situations, about people. And I think that's, well, I try to push that forward in my art making, but also in my daily life and activist work. And I'm really goofy and sloppy, and I laugh too loud, and it's always way too high, and it's like too loud, you know. But it's like that is who I am. So I talk about these things also that are very serious and very dark and very fucking real. But there's also like me cackling alongside it. And, you know, knocking over shit on the table.
Making noises.
Yeah. And then farting. And then like talking about how I farted and I'm really sorry, but I didn't actually fart. But I will.
At some point, someday.
Yes. But like, I think that's another gift from my dead mother too, is just remembering she used to say, don't think that your shit doesn't stink. And my siblings experienced that as don't get too big for your britches. Like, don't think too much of yourself. I understood it totally differently just because of the way my brain works. But I was like, oh, we're all the same. Like, we all are equal in that. Like, all of us have this body that we are just trying to reckon with as we age, which inherently is as we watch it fall apart as we are living in it. And there's so much humor in that, in this body. There is so much humor, and there is so much joy in that, and also so much sadness. Like, I wish that my HIV medication didn't like demineralize my bones, because I broke my ankle on the dance floor at the Black Eagle last April, and now I feel like more afraid in my body. And I don't want that. I want to have a different relationship, but I'm also really interested in like the jokes that my body plays on me and tells for me now. And I want to be able to laugh along with those too. So, you know, because otherwise it's just crying.
Attention all passengers, Captain Patrice speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude. We're now approaching the fourth and final part of the YUL Creativity Flight, where Montreal host Éric concludes his conversation with Gabriel and Mikiki about the profound role of the body in both addiction and recovery. More compelling stories await. Subscribe to stay updated. If you've encountered turbulence while listening to this podcast, please refer to our list of resources and services related to PNP chemsex in the episode description and on chemstories.ca.